Hey guys, it's Fallon, your friendly neighborhood librarian, and I am coming to you guys today. I'm filming this in the past, but you guys are in the future for a book that I have an arc for, and it is The Downstairs Girl by Stacy Lee. And this is going to be basically just a giant gush at how much I love Stacy Lee books because she writes YA historical fiction with diverse characters and like realistic diverse characters. So a little bit of a summary of The Downstairs Girl, which is kind of hard to do, and I'll go into why that is more towards the end of the review. But the book is about Jo Kwan. She is a Chinese girl living in 1890s Atlanta. And the problem with Jo is that not only is she Chinese, but she doesn't have any kind of birth certificate, so she can't even show that she is definitely born in America and an American citizen. So add that on top of Southern Atlanta 1890s and racism abound, she has to basically take what job she can get and bite her tongue frequently. So Jo ends up, at the beginning of the book, she's working for a haberdasher, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a person who makes the hats. These were very big during the Victorian times and the early 20th century. Jo is very, very good at making hats. She's very, very good at making the, and I can't think of the word that they use for those, but the little accessories that you pin to the hats. She's very good at that. And she gets fired at the very beginning of the book because she's Chinese, and basically a customer complained that they didn't want her touching their hats, which was a common thing back then. It might actually still be common today. I don't personally experience that, but you know, racism is racism. So she has to find another job. She lives with a man named Old Jin, and they live in underneath a house that is owned by the newspaper publisher. They live in what used to be the Underground Railroad. They live there secretly. The people who own the house don't know it. And she hears that the newspaper subscriptions are going down in numbers, and that if they don't get more subscriptions, they're going to have to sell the house and sell the publisher, which is a problem for Jo and Old Jin because then they will not have those people to live under, and it might be new people. It might be people that will find out their secret, because even though the publisher and the owners of the home don't know that they're living there, they've never really had to deal with new people moving in above them. So Jo starts to write a agony aunt, which is like a Dear Abby kind of, or E. Jean if you read Elle magazine. She writes an agony aunt column under the name Miss Sweetie, and it's basically a very feminist column, and it's the little tidbits that you get of it in this book are very cute and very like sassy, and I love it. And I was waiting for that to become like way more scandalous, like someone was going to out her, but it ends up not being that big of a factor of the story, which is interesting because it kind of factors a lot in the summary on the back, which is an interesting choice of the publisher because there's so much going on in this book. That I've just like barely tipped the iceberg. Not only does she write this column secretly and anonymously, she does get discovered throughout the book. There's a romantic side plot. There's a mystery about who her mom and dad are. There's a mystery about why Old Jin is, like, A, not really eating. Is he really, really sick? And B, what he's doing with, like, the local kind of mafia guy. And all the characters are interconnected in weird ways, and there's a horse race, and she ends up working as a lady's maid for the daughter of, I don't even remember their names, but she grew up with this girl that she ends up working as a lady's maid, and she despises her. But being Chinese in the South, she's trying to find a job where they're basically going to pay her. She can be assured that she's getting payment and that she can still support her and Old Jin living in this secret life. So that is a very vague summary. Like I said, there's a lot in this book. It's not a very thick book. I think the hardcover on Goodreads says it's 304 pages. Here in the ARC, it's 365. So I imagine it's probably because the hardcover is a lot bigger. There is So much going on with this book. Again, I love Stacy Lee books. If you've never checked out her books, I think this is a really good intro to them because it's a little bit more light than some of the other ones. Some of the other ones have kind of bittersweet endings. That was actually a complaint of mine on this one, is that the ending is too tied up. It's too nice. Stacy Lee spends a lot of time going through and showing you how awful living in the South during the 1890s when you are a person of color is. And that and there's a great discussion because there's a lot of talk about the suffragettes and the women getting the vote. And Jo goes to these meetings and she basically gets turned away because they're not interested in women of color having the vote. They're interested in white women having the vote. And I thought that was interesting. An interesting move by Stacy Lee to do because it's about intersectionality and feminism, and that's a problem we have today in the 21st century. So showing that in 1890s Atlanta is very interesting, showing how even though, black people, you always hear about black people and white people in the South during the 1800s and the 1900s. You don't really hear a lot about how other people of color are treated, and I think that's something that Lee does a really good job of showcasing. And so overall, the book is great. I don't want to spoil any of it because I do think it's worth taking the time to read. I want to give you more detail, but I don't know how much more detail I can give you. Let's just say there's a lot going on. There's a romantic side plot that I was actually really grateful that didn't get too entangled in the rest of it because it's not really needed. It's not necessary. Some of the other stuff is a little unnecessary. Like there's a horse race that really matters at the end. That's not really all that necessary for the book to tie up. I kind of wish the Miss Sweetie columns were a lot more of a factor in it. So if that's what you're looking for, because I think the summary plot on the back of the book is very misleading, it's not actually really that big of a factor for the book. The majority of it doesn't really even deal with that. Like I think she gets found out maybe about a third of the way through. She's not found out by everybody, but she is found out by the publisher, and then that starts the romantic side plot because there's a young boy, and of course, and that was one thing also that I found interesting that she didn't deal with, the author. She didn't deal with the fact that this boy was white, and he, I think, was falling in love with Jo. She didn't really deal with how that would have jived in society because, yeah, interracial relationships were not a thing that you could have. They might have been a thing as in they happened, but they were not a thing that, like, a high-standing member of society, a white boy who's a, son of a publisher of a newspaper, could be seen with what was potentially, in Atlanta's eyes, an illegal Chinese immigrant. So I thought that would be more of a factor, but it wasn't, and I kind of wish it was, just because of how the book was going and how the book was told. And it became more frivolous as the time went on, but I still give this book 4.5 stars. I still think it's a great book. It's a great introduction to historical fiction for teens. I don't think there was any problems with, like, maturity issues. There's some violence in it, but it's not like the end of the world. But overall, I like this book. I definitely recommend it. I'm going to set this video to publish on the day that this book actually comes out, which I believe is August 15th. I don't think it says on here. Yeah, but I believe it's August 15th. So I'll set this to publish that day. I hope you guys pick up this book. It's definitely worth your time. And any other Stacy Lee books, please, please, please pick them up. I highly recommend her writing. She's very good at writing diverse historical fiction, which is something that is desperately needed in today's world. So that's it for this review. I will check you all out later. Have a great day.